Rain lashed against Max's fur, soaking him to the bone as he stumbled through the dense underbrush. His paws sank into the mud, his muscles screaming with exhaustion, but he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when his life depended on it. The deep, guttural growls behind him sent a fresh surge of adrenaline through his veins. Whatever was chasing him was relentless. He could hear heavy footsteps pounding against the wet earth, closing in. His lungs burned. His legs felt like they would give out at any second. His body was failing him, but his instincts told him to keep running. He pushed forward, weaving between trees, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. His side burned where something had grazed him, a wound slowing him down. He didn't know if it was a bite, a claw, or a jagged branch tearing into his skin. All he knew was that if he stopped now, he wouldn't get back up. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the sky. Lightning split through the darkness, illuminating the forest for a brief second before plunging everything back into blackness. The ground beneath him was slick, the heavy rain turning dirt into thick mud. His paws slipped, sending him crashing onto his side. Pain shot through his body as he hit the cold, wet earth. No. Get up. Keep moving. Max tried to stand, but his legs trembled beneath him, refusing to cooperate. His breaths came out in heavy, uneven gasps. The air smelled of wet leaves, mud, and blood. His blood. He had fought for so long. Hours, maybe. He had lost track of time. But now, as his body refused to move, he realized something. He wasn't going to make it. The growling behind him grew louder. Closer. A shiver ran down his spine. This was the end. His heart pounded, but he was too weak to fight anymore. The forest blurred around him. The storm raged on. And then... a sound. Not the growls of his pursuers. Not the thunder rumbling in the distance. Something else. A footstep. Soft. Measured. Close. Max's ears twitched. Through his blurred vision, he saw a shadow moving toward him. Someone was there. His instincts battled between fear and hope. The rain pounded harder, soaking the ground and drenching Max's fur. He lay there, motionless, his mind hazy with exhaustion. The storm continued to rage, thunder rolling across the sky like distant drums. The shadow moved closer. Max tried to focus, his vision swimming. He barely had the strength to lift his head, let alone defend himself. If this was another predator, he had no fight left. Another footstep. Then another. A flash of lightning illuminated the figure just for a second, but it was enough for Max to see a human. Max's breathing hitched. Was this his owner? A rescuer? Or someone who meant him harm? He tried to move, to pull himself upright, but his body refused to obey. The figure crouched down, reaching a hand toward him. Max flinched instinctively, a weak growl rumbling in his throat, but it was barely more than a whisper. The person didn't pull back. Instead, they spoke. Soft. Calm. Reassuring. Max's ears twitched at the sound. His vision blurred again, and his body sagged against the cold earth. His last thought before the darkness took him was simple. Was this a savior, or something worse? Rain dripped from Max's matted fur, pooling in the muddy ground beneath him. His body ached, his lungs burned, and his mind swayed between exhaustion and survival. He could feel the cold creeping in, numbing his limbs, making it harder to move. But he wasn't alone. Through the blur of rain and pain, a shadow moved toward him. Max barely lifted his head, his ears twitching at the soft, careful footsteps approaching. His vision was hazy, the storm distorting the figure's shape, but his instincts screamed at him to stay alert. Was this a friend? Or another threat? A low growl rumbled in his throat, weak, barely more than a whisper, but it was all he could manage. The figure didn't flinch. Instead, they knelt down, close but not too close, their presence cautious yet calm. Max struggled to focus. Who was this? A stranger passing through? A hunter? Had someone finally found him, or had they been looking for him all along? Then, a voice. Soft. Gentle. Humans. The sound cut through the storm like a distant melody, something Max hadn't heard in so long. His ears twitched, but he didn't move. He was too weak, too tired to react. The person spoke again, their tone soothing, careful. They weren't yelling. They weren't forcing themselves on him. They were waiting. Giving him a choice. But could he trust them? Max had learned the hard way that humans could be dangerous. They could be kind, or cruel. He had once known a gentle touch, a warm home, the feeling of safety. But that life had disappeared. Whether through abandonment, accident, or tragedy, Max had lost everything. And now? Now, he was lying in the mud, on the verge of death, with a stranger reaching out to him. Could he take the risk? His body trembled violently as he tried to shift his weight. Pain seared through his limbs, and he collapsed again, his vision flashing white with agony. The person leaned in slightly, but they didn't force him. Instead, they did something Max didn't expect. They reached into their bag and pulled something out. Food. A small piece of bread. A scrap of dried meat. Nothing much, but to Max, it smelled like life itself. His nose twitched. His stomach, weak and empty, clenched painfully. Hunger fought against his fear. The person set the food down, just within reach, but they didn't push it toward him. They didn't try to trick him. They waited. Max stared at the offering, his instincts at war. His vision wavered, the world tilting. His strength was failing. And then, finally, he moved. It was barely a twitch, but it was enough. Slowly, painfully, Max stretched his neck forward, his nose brushing against the damp ground. He sniffed the food, testing it, making sure it was real. The scent was intoxicating, but his exhaustion made even this simple movement feel impossible. The person still didn't rush him. They stayed perfectly still, their breath barely audible over the storm. Max hesitated. This could be a trap. But right now, did it even matter? With what little strength he had left, he took the first bite. It was dry, tasteless against his numb tongue, but his body didn't care. His survival instincts took over, and he swallowed hungrily. The person let out a soft breath, a sigh of relief. For the first time, Max truly looked at them. The rain blurred their features, but he could make out kind eyes. Tired eyes. Someone who had seen pain before. And then, something strange happened. Instead of reaching for him, instead of grabbing him, the person leaned back. They gave him space. They weren't here to trap him. They weren't here to hurt him. Max didn't know what to do with that. Minutes passed. The storm raged on. The person reached into their bag again, pulling out something warmer, a blanket, a piece of cloth, anything to shield Max from the relentless cold. But time was running out. Max was still too weak. He couldn't walk. He could barely lift his head. If he stayed here much longer, the storm would finish what exhaustion had started. The person seemed to realize this. They hesitated for only a moment before making their choice. They reached out, slowly, carefully. Max tensed. His body stiffened, his instincts screaming at him to pull away. But his mind whispered something different. You don't have a choice. If he ran, he wouldn't make it. If he fought, he would lose. If he stayed here, he would die. This human was his last chance. The person placed a hand gently on his soaked fur. For the first time in what felt like forever. Max didn't flinch. The world swayed as he felt himself being lifted. He was too weak to resist, too tired to fight back. The warmth of the blanket wrapped around him, shielding him from the bitter cold. A deep exhaustion settled in his bones, but for the first time, it wasn't out of fear. He let his eyes drift closed, his breath slowing. Somewhere in the distance, the growls had disappeared. For now, the danger was gone. But one question still remained. Would Max truly accept help? Or when he woke, would he still choose to fight alone? Rain poured relentlessly, soaking through the fabric of the rescuer's jacket as they tightened their grip around Max's trembling body. He was too weak to walk, barely able to lift his head. Every breath he took was ragged, uneven. His body was limp, completely drained from his fight to survive. But the rescuer didn't give up. With a firm but careful hold, they hoisted him up, wrapping him in the cloth they had brought. Max barely reacted. He was exhausted, his body heavy against them. "We're getting out of here," the rescuer murmured, though they knew Max couldn't understand. "Just hold on." The storm was only getting worse. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the dense trees surrounding them. The ground had turned into a swamp of mud and fallen leaves, making every step a struggle. The rescuers stumbled, nearly losing their footing as the weight of the dog shifted in their arms. Max let out a weak whimper. "Easy, buddy," they whispered, adjusting their grip. They needed to move faster. Max was barely conscious, but through the haze of exhaustion, he could feel the motion, the rhythmic sway of being carried, the steady heartbeat of the human against him. For the first time in what felt like forever, he wasn't alone. But danger still lurked in the darkness. A distant howl pierced through the storm, sending a shiver down the rescuer's spine. Wolves. They weren't close yet, but they weren't far either. The rescuer's breath quickened. They had to get out of the open. Thunder cracked above them, and suddenly, a branch snapped nearby. The rescuer's heart leapt into their throat. Something was moving. They froze, tightening their grip on Max. The rain pounded down, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Then, another snap. Something, or someone, was in the woods with them. Max stirred slightly in their arms, his ears twitching. His instincts were still strong, even in his weakened state. The rescuer listened. Silence. Then, in the next flash of lightning, a shadow moved between the trees. They had to move. Now. The rescuer picked up the pace, pushing through the undergrowth, ignoring the branches whipping against their arms and legs. Max's breathing was still shallow, but he was alive. That was all that mattered. A cave. The rescuers spotted the entrance just ahead, a small rocky overhang, enough to keep them hidden and dry for the night. They staggered toward it, nearly slipping on the slick ground, but they didn't stop. Once inside, they carefully lowered Max onto the driest patch of earth they could find. His body trembled, but his eyes flickered open. For the first time, he looked at them. Really looked. The rescuer knelt beside him, rummaging through their bag for whatever supplies they had. A small bottle of water. Some bandages. Not much, but it was better than nothing. Max flinched when they reached toward him. But then, after a moment, he stopped. He didn't pull away. He didn't growl. He let them help. The rescuer gently wiped the mud from his fur, checking his wounds. Some were shallow, but others were deep, ones that would take time to heal. Max's eyes stayed on them the whole time. For the first time since this nightmare began, he felt something other than fear. The storm raged outside, but inside the cave, there was an understanding. A fragile, unspoken trust. Max still didn't know who this human was. He didn't know why they had stopped for him, why they had risked themselves to pull him from the mud and carry him through the storm. But he knew this. They hadn't hurt him. They had given him food. They had carried him when he couldn't move. They had saved his life. For the first time, Max let his body relax, if only just a little. The rescuer smiled faintly. "There you go," they murmured. "You're safe now." But the fight wasn't over yet. Just as they were about to settle in for the night, Max's ears perked. A low snarl rumbled in his throat. The rescuer tensed. Then they heard it. Footsteps. Not human. Not far. And getting closer. Max struggled to stand, his legs trembling beneath him. He wasn't ready for another fight, but he would fight anyway. The rescuer clenched their fists. They had come too far to lose now. But could they survive this together? The rain had stopped, but the storm inside Max had not. The rescuer sat beside him, their back resting against the cold stone wall of the cave. The fire they had built was small, just enough to provide warmth and light. Max lay on a blanket, his breathing steady but slow. For the first time in what felt like forever, he wasn't running. He wasn't fighting. But who was he before all this? The rescuer studied the dog carefully, noting the scars beneath his damp fur, the way his ribs still faintly showed despite the food and care he had received. Max had been through something. Something bad. Then, their eyes landed on it, a faint engraving on his old, worn collar. Carefully, they reached for it, fingers brushing against the scratched metal tag. The letters were barely readable, eroded by time and exposure to the elements. But one word stood out. A name. And suddenly, everything changed. Max stirred at the touch, his ears twitching. For a moment, he was no longer in the cave. He was somewhere else. A backyard, wide and open, sunlight pouring through the trees. A child's laughter echoed in his ears. Soft hands petting him, a ball being thrown. Go get it, Max. His heart pounded as the memory flashed through his mind. The warmth, the safety, the love, it had all been real. And then, just as quickly, the vision shifted. A stormy night, much like this one. The sound of yelling. Doors slamming. Then, fear. He remembered running, the wind whipping against his face, the scent of the road beneath his paws. Headlights in the distance. Tires screeching. And then, nothing. Darkness. Max let out a low whimper, and the rescuer pulled back slightly, watching as the dog's paws twitched in his sleep. He was dreaming. Reliving something. And from the look of it, something painful. The rescuer traced the name on Max's tag again, determination settling in. This dog wasn't just some stray. Someone had loved him once. Someone had given him a name, a home, a family. But what had happened? Had he been lost? Forgotten? Or left behind on purpose? They had seen abandoned dogs before. Too many times, people got tired of them, when they were no longer puppies, when they needed care, when life became too inconvenient. Was that what had happened to Max? Or was it something worse? The rescuer thought about all the possibilities. Maybe Max's family had lost him in an accident, maybe they had searched for him for months, never knowing where he had ended up. Or maybe they had given him up, thinking he wasn't worth the trouble. The thought made their stomach turn. As the night stretched on, Max slowly regained more of his strength. He drank water. Ate a little. Even lifted his head to watch his rescuer as they moved around the cave. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving. He was living. And for the first time, the rescuer saw something in Max's eyes that wasn't just exhaustion or fear. It was trust. Slowly, carefully, Max stretched his paw forward, resting it on the rescuer's knee. The gesture was small, barely noticeable. But to them, it meant everything. For the next few days, Max's strength returned little by little. He could sit up, then stand. His tail, once still and lifeless, began to wag slightly when he saw the rescuer approach. They spent their days exploring the area around the cave, letting Max stretch his legs, rebuilding the energy he had lost. But the rescuer knew they couldn't stay here forever. Max deserved more than just surviving in the wilderness. They needed to make a choice. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the forest damp and glistening under the first rays of sunlight. Max stood at the mouth of the cave, the cool breeze ruffling his fur. His legs were still weak, but he was stronger than before. The rescuer stood beside him, looking down at the dog who had once been on the brink of death. Max had survived. But now, a bigger question looms. What happened next? Did they try to find his old home? Did Max even want to go back? Or has everything changed forever? Max stood at the edge of the forest, his fur no longer matted and dull but thick and gleaming under the morning sun. Just days ago, he had been broken, starving, weak, barely clinging to life. But now, he was different. He had survived. He had fought through pain, exhaustion, and fear, and he had come out on the other side. His rescuer stood beside him, watching closely. They had found him in his weakest moment, given him warmth, food, and a reason to trust again. They had saved him, but in a way, Max had saved them too. There was something about the way he looked at them now, like he understood everything that had happened. Like he knew a choice had to be made. Would he return to the life he once knew? Or had everything changed forever? The rescuer had done their best to find out where Max had come from. They had searched local shelters, posted online, even checked with veterinarians. They had hoped someone might come forward, that maybe, just maybe, Max had a family still looking for him. But there had been nothing. No reports of a missing German shepherd. No desperate owners searching for their lost dog. Nothing. Max had been left behind. The thought made the rescuer's stomach twist, but when they looked at him, they didn't see sadness. They didn't see the loss. They saw freedom. Max wasn't tied to his past anymore. He had made it through something that should have broken him. And now, he had a choice. The rescuer knelt beside him, brushing a hand through his fur. "So, what do you want, buddy?" Max lifted his head, his ears twitching at the soft sound of their voice. For a long moment, he stood still, looking out at the open world before him. The forest, the sky, the road leading to a future unknown. And then, he made his decision. Max stepped forward, not toward the woods, not toward the past, but toward his rescuer. He pressed his head against their chest, letting out a slow, deep sigh. A silent answer. A silent promise. The rescuer let out a shaky breath, a smile forming on their lips as they wrapped their arms around him. "Guess that settles it," they murmured. Max had already chosen. He wasn't lost anymore. He was home. The transformation was undeniable, from a dog who had been at the edge of death to a symbol of resilience and survival. Max had been given a second chance, and he had taken it. He had fought for it. And now, he would never have to fight alone again. Not all heroes wear capes. Some have fur paws, and the heart of a fighter. Never underestimate the spirit of survival, even when all hope seems lost.